Okay, so in this video, we want to pick up from where we left off in our series of becoming a systems administrator. We have an environment that we've been building upon that's been one server that's a domain controller. So now we want to add to that because we don't want to have a single point of failure. So in this video, we want to be promoting a Windows 2012 server to a domain controller. What do those steps look like? And we're going to go through adding it in. We're going to look at Active Directory afterwards, and then we're going to take a look and see what the differences are between the servers as we've added them, and what do we see? What does the environment look like after that server's been added? All right, well, with no further delay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay, we're now in our environment. So if we go right here to local server, as we saw before, we can first of all, we can take a look at the features and things that are on the server. But if we choose local server and we go here, we can see we're still part of a work group. So what we want to do is go ahead and join this server to the domain. So we're going to go ahead and select change from here. And we're going to go ahead and add this server to the domain. All right, so you can see here we're getting our prompt for our password. So we're going to go ahead and type that in here. So we're typing in the password for the domain of an account that actually can join this computer to the domain. So we're going to say OK here. It takes a few moments here. And we'll get a prompt here in just a moment. There we go. Select OK. We'll select OK again here. And then from here, we have to go ahead and restart this particular server. So we're going to say close here. And we're going to go ahead and say restart now. And we'll pick up the video as soon as this server is done restarting. Okay, now that our server has rebooted, this might look like a familiar screen if you watched the other videos. Now you're at the prompt to log on to the server. So in this case here, this is logging on to the server locally, but in this case, we want to actually log on to it on the domain, not the local server. So we'll select the back arrow here, select other. Then we'll type in the domain administrator account. And remember, if we would have used a different account here, when we go to join the computer to the domain, it would have been the same thing as we still would have got the same prompt to promote the server. So we still would have had to provide a domain admin account to get the server onto the domain. So we'll go ahead and hit OK here. Once the server gets logged in, we'll go through the process of promoting this server to a domain controller. So once the server is logged in, we will get the server manager up here in just a moment. From here, we'll go through the same steps that we performed before, but in this case here, we'll be promoting this particular server to a domain controller. And by default, the server right now is going to be in the computer OU. I can actually jump over to our other server previous to this one and take a look in Active Directory and show you where this server landed. Okay, now that we're back over here on our primary domain controller, you can see here, we're over here on Lab AD01. And we can see here, if we go to Active Directory, Users and Computers, we click on the Computers OU here, we can see here is our new server that we're going to be promoting to a domain controller, and it's going to be Lab AD02. And you can see it landing in the default container. Once we are done promoting this server, it will then automatically get moved over to a domain controller. So it'll end up in this OU, and we'll see it after the fact, after it does a reboot. And if we would have had group policies and things applied to this OU, we would actually see those whenever we log into the server. And we'll get to group policies here later in this series. For now, we'll jump back over and we'll go ahead and promote that server to a domain controller. Okay, we're back over on our other server that we just joined to the domain. You can see we're on Lab AD02. Go ahead and add a role and feature here to this particular server. And again, when we go through this wizard, if we had multiple servers we were going to promote, we'd be able to do that here on the next screen. So we'll go ahead and click next here. And so if we had multiple servers where we're going to be configuring, we would do that here. We'd actually add them into here. But in this case here, we have the one server in the pool that we're going to be doing. Go ahead and click next here. And for this one, we're going to go ahead and add in Active Directory domain services, just like we did before, and all of its prerequisites along with it. So go ahead and add those features. We'll select next here. And remember, when this gets to the next screen, as it's going through the summary, when this is done, we'll have an opportunity to go through and configure the roles and everything for AD and promote it and things of that nature. So if we go back here, remember, group policy is selected for us as it is a prerequisite for this. So it's automatically selected for us. We'll go ahead and click next here. We'll go ahead and say install these features. So you can see here the check mark that actually said restart. If we would have chose the option to restart, we would actually miss our prompt at the end to select it. We would end up getting another option here when it's done installing and the server would have rebooted. We'd have had to do it from within here. We would have had one that actually would have said AD, and it would have actually been right here underneath the all servers. All right, so we'll just pause the video, wait on this install to complete, and we'll pick right back up. Okay, guys, so as you can see here, our installation of the feature has completed. We'll go ahead and here's our hyperlink here that I was talking about earlier. So as you can see here, our ADDS, Active Directory Domain Services, has appeared under here. We can go ahead and promote this server to a domain controller. So we'll go ahead and select that here. So now that this screen has popped up, remember, we're going to be adding this to an existing domain. So from here, it already sees that we're part of the test lab, so we don't have to select and go and search for it or anything like that. So if there was something different, we could go through and select here. If there were multiple, if we were part of a forest, it would show up here as well. So now we can go ahead and select next. Oh, and you can see here for as the credentials goes. Remember before, if we selected this option, we would have to supply the credentials, but it already knows that we're using the administrator account. Otherwise, we'd have to change it. We'd have to select here, select the account that we're going to use. But in this case here, we're logged on with the administrator account. So we can go ahead and select next here. So in this case here, it's also going to go through and it's going to make me go ahead and supply that as well. Alrighty, so we've got those credentials specified now. Go ahead and select next here. So we can see here that it's already going to install the options that we're going to need. So by default, because it's going to be a domain controller, it's going to need to store the global catalog as well. It's also going to need to have the DNS, the domain naming system, as well installed so we can resolve names. If this was being deployed into a different environment, like one that was not accessible by the internet, we could make it a read-only domain controller to where it only needed to provide just DNS and authentication. No changes and all could be made. If we had multiple sites involved, so if we had another site that was in Chicago, we would select it from here. But in this case here, we only have one site. This will be under sites and services, which we'll get into a little bit later in this series. We would select that particular site from here. But in this case, this is going to be a domain controller in our default site. So from here, we'll go ahead and supply our recovery password. So just like before, when we done it, we'll supply our password here. All right, we'll go ahead and select next here. All right, and remember, there's no need to do a delegate here. That's something we can do from within AD. So in this case here, we're going to go ahead and select next here. All right, and as far as domain control, remember it's going to replicate to any domain controllers. We can select the ones within here or any domain controller. So if we were ever to join this to another forest or to another domain doing like a trust relationship, we would select this option here. And if we were just going to only replicate within the domain, it would be here. But in this case here, we want to set the default. So we go ahead and select next here. It's going to be where our database is going to be stored, our Active Directory database on this particular server. Again, if we had a E drive or a D drive, something else installed on here, we could move these to another location. So, normally for performance, you'd want to have these in a different location. But in this case here, we only have one drive, so we'll go ahead and select next. This is our summary of everything that's going to be done here. Let's go ahead and select next again. And once the installation is done, we're going to be prompted to do another restart. And we'll resume once this installation is done. Okay, so as we can see, our server, we have a blank screen here. Our server has already begun its restart. And again, we'll resume as soon as the server responds and comes back up. All right, we're back. And as you can see, our server has booted back up. Okay, we'll go ahead and get logged in here. Okay, so once we get logged into the server, we'll actually, nothing will look the same right off the bat. It will look just like the normal server, but inside of our administrative tools, we're actually going to see more options in there, more of our tools as far as Active Directory, users and computers, domain services and trust, things of that nature. Just like before, server was pretty snappy before, but as you can see now, server gets a little bit slower as it's now a domain controller. It has more services to start. And so this server here only has a little bit of memory in it as it is a virtual machine. So it'll take just a few moments for it to get going, and then we will take a look at the server manager that will pop up here momentarily, and we'll look at the same options you'll see inside a control panel, things of that nature. All right. Okay, so just like before, our server manager has launched, and you can see here we have our default screen. If we go over here to tools or we go to manage, we'll start to see some of the items that we saw before on our other domain controller. That was AD Lab 1. So we'll go ahead and select Active Directory users and computers from our list here. And when that comes up, we'll actually take a look at the domain controllers OU. So here we are here. Now we have access to this MMC console. We can go ahead and select domain controllers. And you can see now we see our second domain controllers listed here. Go in and look at some of the options that are on here, or I guess properties of this particular object, I should say. So we can see here that this server is a domain controller. So it is a global catalog server. We can look at the operating system of this particular machine, members of, and it's a member of the domain controllers OU group. As far as delegates go, you can see here this computer is trusted and is using Kerberos. Kerberos is going to be how the computer authenticates the object to Active Directory, and this is going to be for a user, it's going to be for printers, it's going to be for all of those things. As you know, most things like users, they all have passwords, where computers have passwords too. Those things have to be renewed just like a user account. So it happens in the background, and that all is handled by the Kerberos side of things. So we can go ahead and click on our location. If we wanted to supply a location where this particular server is, we can do that from here. And it is kind of best practice to start getting used to populating a lot of this data within Active Directory. It does come into use later as you go throughout the environment. Different things will tie into Active Directory, and some of these items here will come into play. So you could add a location here if needed. Managed by, this would be like a system administrator who actually manages this particular item. Once you select that, it'll populate all of the information here for that. And then as far as dial-in goes, if this was a user account, this would say whether or not this would be accessed accessible to dial in. Again, this is NPS. This is going to be a network policy here, and so we'll actually go through and configure some of this stuff later. This actually took the place of Radius, so you'll probably throughout your career hear people talk about Radius logins and Radius authentication. NPS took over that particular type of technology, so which is what Microsoft refers to it as now. So for this, we'll go ahead and hit cancel for now. And that is how to add a domain controller or promote a server to a domain controller. And we'll get into some of the different things we can start looking at as far as changing the different roles of a particular server. So when we come into here, we'll be able to come in and take a look at the different roles. And if we want to look at the domain itself, we'll be able to right click on that, look at our operations master, and these will be the different roles that are being held. And you can see here's what's available now. So if we wanted to take our FSMA roles, and we talked about FSMA roles when we got started down this road of the different things of that are used to control Active Directory. We'll go through in our next video. We're going to talk about what those roles are, how they come into play, and why they're important. All right. And that's all for now, folks. And I want to thank you all for viewing, and we'll talk to you in the next one.